The incident began with the stark, familiar syntax of a modern tragedy: active shooter, university campus, public figure. On the day commentator Charlie Kirk was scheduled to speak at Utah Valley University, the predictable rhythms of political discourse were shattered by gunfire. The initial hours were a maelstrom of confusion, news alerts competing for primacy, social media feeds overflowing with unverified reports, and a community gripped by a well-rehearsed terror. The narrative, however, through leaked facility schematics and anonymous testimonies from individuals present, a clear picture emerged of one camera that was conspicuously absent from the released materials, Camera 14B. This was a rear-facing unit, positioned with a critical and unique sightline. Its lens was trained on the area directly behind the stage where Charlie Kirk had been standing. While other cameras captured the crowd's panic or the broad strokes of the scene, Camera 14B was uniquely poised to document the final moments and, more crucially, the immediate aftermath in a specific, restricted zone. It was the one camera that could see what happened when the primary threat was over, in a space that should have been contained and controlled. The value of this perspective is what makes the subsequent events so confounding. While the officially released footage showed the public what it already knew, that there was chaos, Camera 14B held the potential to show something else entirely: the response within the inner circle of the event, the actions of individuals close to the epicenter when the world was watching the periphery. The witness descriptions of the person who approached Camera 14B are consistent and deeply unsettling. In stark contrast to the surrounding panic, the cries for help, the disoriented crowds, the arrival of armed response teams, this individual was reported to have moved with an unnerving, methodical calm. They did not run. They did not assist the injured. They did not identify themselves to arriving officers. Their trajectory was singular and direct, to the housing of the rear security camera. Their actions were described as precise and deliberate. There was no fumbling, no hesitation. They accessed the unit and performed the specific task of removing the SD card. Having secured the small piece of plastic and silicon, this person then reportedly melted back into the tumultuous crowd, disappearing without a trace. They became a ghost, their identity and affiliation the subject of intense speculation. The fundamental question, the one that fuels the entire engine of suspicion, is why? In the heart of a mass casualty event, when human instinct and professional protocol would dictate rendering aid or securing the perimeter, why would an individual's sole focus be the acquisition of a specific piece of digital evidence? The act is so counterintuitive, so divorced from the expected response to crisis, that it demands an explanation that has not been forthcoming. The void of official information was quickly filled by a torrent of public interpretation, fracturing the consensus on what had truly occurred. The digital arena became the primary battleground for these competing narratives. One camp, often appealing to reason and order, posits benign or justifiable explanations. The individual, they argue, was likely a federal agent or a private security detail member acting with authority. Their mission: to secure highly sensitive footage that could compromise operational tactics, reveal the identities of protected individuals, or contain graphically disturbing content unsuitable for public release. In this view, the act, while appearing suspicious, was a necessary function of a professional response, a harsh but rational protocol enacted in the fog of war. A second, more skeptical faction finds this explanation profoundly inadequate. Their questions are pointed and numerous. If the individual was an authorized agent, why has no agency, federal, state, or local, stepped forward to claim responsibility for the action? Why was the act performed with such covert efficiency, without any apparent communication with other responding units? Would not standard procedure involve logging the action, establishing a clear chain of custody from the moment of acquisition, rather than creating a scenario where the evidence had to be recovered later? This group sees the removal not as preservation, but as suppression. They argue that the footage from Camera 14B must contain something that contradicts the official narrative, an alternate sequence of events, the presence of unexpected individuals, or actions by certain parties that appear questionable under the harsh lens of hindsight. The very secrecy surrounding the tape is, for them, prima facie evidence of its incriminating nature. The rallying cry is no longer about the shooter, but about the evidence itself, a demand for full transparency. In any judicial process, the integrity of evidence is paramount. This integrity is safeguarded by the chain of custody, a meticulously documented and unbroken timeline that accounts for every person who handles a piece of evidence, from its discovery to its presentation in a courtroom. This chain is the bedrock upon which trust in the entire system is built. It ensures that evidence has not been tampered with, altered, or contaminated. The case of the UVU SD card presents a catastrophic failure at the very first link of this chain. The individual who removed the card is an unknown entity. There is no record of their authority, no documentation of their possession, no known point at which they formally transferred the evidence to law enforcement. The card entered a liminal state, its whereabouts and integrity unknown for an unconfirmed period until it was officially recovered. This breach is not a minor procedural oversight, it is a fundamental rupture. It means that the most critical piece of visual evidence from the aftermath of a major public event has a gaping, unexplained hole in its provenance. Defense attorneys, journalists, and concerned citizens alike are left to wonder, from the moment it was taken to the moment it was recovered, where was it? Who had it? What, if anything, was done to it? The inability to answer these basic questions invalidates the evidence's credibility before its contents are ever seen. The seal placed upon it by federal order, rather than protecting its integrity, is now perceived by many as sealing in the doubt and contamination introduced at the scene. In the weeks following the incident, authorities have continued to release additional materials, more video clips, edited composites of the event, official timelines, in an effort to demonstrate a commitment to transparency. Yet, this strategy has backfired. Each new release that excludes the footage from camera 14B only serves to highlight its absence more starkly. By showing the public everything but that one critical angle, officials have inadvertently affirmed its supreme importance. This selective disclosure forces the public to engage in a form of forensic archaeology by omission. What could be on that tape that is more sensitive than the other released footage, which itself depicts a traumatic and violent event? The theories are varied and deeply unsettling. Perhaps the footage reveals a delayed or confused response from certain security personnel. Perhaps it captures interactions or communications that are at odds with official statements made in the aftermath. Perhaps it shows the presence of individuals whose involvement has not been disclosed, raising questions about a broader conspiracy. Or, perhaps most troubling of all, it reveals nothing of evidentiary value, making its seizure and sequestration an act of such profound irrationality that the true motivation becomes even more frightening to contemplate. The demand is no longer for curated clips, but for the raw, unedited evidentiary record. Calls grow louder for the release of all body camera footage from every responding officer, for the full radio transmission logs, and most pressingly, for the complete and unredacted chain of custody documentation for the SD card. The public, or a significant portion of it, no longer trusts the summary of the facts. It demands the right to examine the primary sources itself. The shooting at Utah Valley University was a localized tragedy, a moment of violence that claimed lives and traumatized a community. However, the mystery of the missing and sequestered SD card has metastasized that tragedy into a national crisis of confidence. The incident is no longer solely about the actions of a lone gunman on a single day. It is about the actions of the institutions tasked with responding to such events and administering justice. The central question has morphed from "what happened" to "what are they hiding?" And in the absence of a credible, unequivocal answer, the public is left to assume the worst. The erosion of trust is a corrosive process. It undermines the legitimacy of the investigation, it fuels dangerous conspiracy theories, and it deepens the societal divisions that the event itself may have been intended to exacerbate. The official investigation continues behind a veil of silence, its findings released in drips and drabs that do little to satiate the public's thirst for clarity. Meanwhile, the parallel, Open-source investigation conducted by journalists, researchers, and citizens continues unabated, parsing every new statement, every leaked document, every inconsistency in the official record. The memory card, sealed in a federal evidence locker, sits at the center of this storm, a silent, potent symbol of the widening chasm between the governed and those who govern. The passage of time, rather than healing the wound, only deepens it. Each day that ends without the release of the rear camera footage is interpreted not as procedural caution, but as confirmation of a cover-up. The tragedy of the shooting is now compounded by the tragedy of a truth perceived as being held hostage. The victims, their families, and the public at large are left in a state of suspended animation, unable to achieve closure when the full picture of what occurred remains deliberately obscured. Until the contents of that memory card are brought into the light, or until a comprehensive and plausible explanation for its seizure and sequestration is provided that withstands public scrutiny, the shadow of doubt will linger over the UVU shooting. The event will stand not only as a reminder of the threat of violence, but as a stark case study in how the handling of evidence, when conducted in darkness, can become a crisis all its own, eroding the very foundation of public trust upon which the administration of justice depends. The story is far from over. The demand for answers and for accountability grows only stronger with time.